Want to expand the reach of your content? Start a podcast. Feature industry experts on your show and leverage the influence and reach of your guests to grow your brand. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Joe Gagliese. He is the co-founder at Viral Nation. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm awesome, buddy. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about some of the challenges and solutions when it comes to influencer marketing in the B2B space today, Joe. First, I would love for you to share with listeners a little bit about yourself and what you and the team at Viral Nation are up to these days.
Awesome. Thank you. So Viral Nation is going on 5 years old now. We're a full service agency, obviously specializing in influencer marketing. But what we've really done is just tried to develop the most disruptive kind of modern agency we can, meaning, whatever we can find in our toolbox to make something work. It's not a predetermined flow. So a lot of what we do is very customized and really focused on driving, conversion ROI and leads.
I love it. Those are always great outcomes that any marketing team are definitely looking for. So we're going to be getting into some of your ideas and the creative ways to go off of what you said there, Joe, that you guys have addressed some of the challenges in influencer marketing in the B2B space. But let's start there. Some of these, might be, low-hanging fruit for the conversation, but let's talk about some of the typical challenges because we're going to address those a little bit later in the conversation. So one of the things that you mentioned to me as we were chatting offline is one of the top challenges is compared to B2C influencer marketing, you've just got a lower pool of potential influencers, right?
Yeah, and it really comes down to scale, right? Especially when we're looking at, really driving the needle and becoming a piece of the funnel that's impactful and not just, a little side project. The scale is really difficult. And that really comes down to the fact that, a lot of the influencers in the B2B space are already established business people. So when you look at it as a whole, in the B2C space, we're paying influencers based on their audience segments. And that's what those influencers do for a living. That's what they rely on to make money. Whereas on the B2B space, what we're finding is we might have a person with a perfect audience who's going to talk about 3D printing, et cetera. But the funny part is that person may be the CEO of a 3D printing company, maybe an analyst who can't sway in a certain direction based off being paid in terms of an ethical standpoint, as well as reporters. So it makes it very difficult, unlike B2C, to really lock these guys down in a meaningful way that's going to actually drive those results. And, the ones that are available, for hire or for a partnership are generally not that large and generally not impactful enough to build a full marketing plan around.
Yeah, so you've got a lower volume of people to pull from. As you alluded to there, you've also got some challenges in how do we compensate these people, especially if there's a conflict of interest or something like that is probably going to come up more readily than with a B2C influencer. And then also, I imagine even if they have a large audience, that might not have come from them just having amazing social media skills, because unless they're a marketer by function, you're probably encountering a lot of people who don't necessarily have your typical social media skills that you equate with an influencer, right?
Yeah, and that's the funny part. It's like, when you think about the type of content that people are consuming today, and we found an analyst who has a large audience of engineers, and we're looking to promote a service or a new piece of technology that's going to assist them, that person's not going to make, a YouTube style vlog video of themselves at home talking about how great this product is, et cetera. So you kind of get pushed into this funnel of editorial content. And, Logan, you and I both know, the lifespan and, how long people are willing to engage, especially with something on LinkedIn or YouTube or even just online, to be
Right.
able to read something of that nature isn't going to be as impactful as what we can do with video. So that's another sticky point when it comes to, figuring out how to do this thing properly.
Yeah, totally makes sense to me. So you've got a lower pool of people, you've got challenges with compensation, you got challenges with their social media and marketing skills. Anything else there on the bad side before we get to some of the possible solutions, some of the other challenges that people might need to overcome or at least think about, Joe?
I think that there are a lot of companies out there that are, the influencer marketing community is new, it's sexy, it's young. So a lot of people are really taking a crack at it. I've been approached by a couple of companies, we're a B2B marketing startup, influencer marketing startup, and et cetera. And I'm just kind of shaking my head at it. You just gotta, people listening to this, just be careful. Just, think it through as a business person. I'm a B2B marketer. I know a lot of B2B marketers. We're really analytic driven. We won't kind of fall for those types of traps. But I think so as we know people who are influencing the decisions of our buyers, and we gotta figure out who those people are and the catalyst between them and the sale. Those people may be attainable, and if they are, pull trigger. Get in there, see if you can have them making content for you, et cetera. Build a partnership, rev share, whatever that may be. But looking at it from a holistic perspective of I'm going to go find my influencers might not be the best way. So that's why we've kind of shied away from really toting. There's influencers in B2B marketing, and we've worked really hard over the last 3 years, especially on our own business, to prove that there are ways to be social, there are ways to build influencers, et cetera, that are going to drive the needle. But the simplistic influencer marketing and B2B for us isn't something that's scalable or working efficiently enough to sell.
That makes sense. So let's talk about some of the ways that people can effectively lean into influencer marketing in the B2B space. And one of those I know that you like to talk about, Joe, is this idea of creating an internal influencer. Unpack that for us a little bit and tell us what that might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it's one of the strongest new forms of marketing and organization, especially on a B2B level. If you think about before, some of those rock star employees that B2B companies have who are out at conferences, they deliver amazing speeches, et cetera, and people really engage with them. There's a way to now take that to the internet, right? So what we try to do and what we did for ourselves is we have a VP here of business development named Travis. And Travis, came to us with this idea, oh God, 3 or 4 years ago and said, I'm going to start building a community on LinkedIn like an influencer does on YouTube or Instagram, et cetera. And what he started to do was these selfie style videos, not crazy produced, just really talking about industry news, things going on with our company, things going on in the space, really creating a lot of value. And over time, we've been able to work together and see his growth go from nothing to, I think he's at 27 or 28,000 people follow him on LinkedIn. And those people are predominantly marketers. So for us, it's a sweet spot. And, granted, he has a really great work ethic and he could deliver that content. But what that did for us was prove the concept of, if you are a B2B company, for instance, our service when it comes to that area is simply providing the tools and the training necessary to be able to produce content that people like. That's the hardest part. And then it's consistency, having them post videos regularly on LinkedIn, having the other members of the team share that content, using paid on LinkedIn in order to promote that to the right people, and really just start to create something similar to your podcast, similar to these types of communities, but in a meaningful way specifically for that brand. And we really feel like that's a powerful tool that I think is being underutilized by a lot of B2B companies today.
Yeah, and you mentioned that internal person on your team. He's VP of Business Development, right, Joe?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I see a lot of organizations that are not willing to allow, much less equip people on the business development and the sales side to invest in their personal brand. But we're big believers that, your brand oftentimes is greatly influenced by the collective perception of the personal brands on your team. So it sounds like we're like-minded there. Let's talk about what that content looks like. I think we all can agree that content in B2B could be up-leveled a little bit sometimes, but you had some creative ideas just to get some possibilities flowing for listeners that you shared with me offline before we hit record. I'd love you for you to speak to that a little bit, Joe.
Absolutely, and it's just like anything, right? You gotta find someone within the organization not only that you feel is going to be there for a long time. You don't want to develop someone like that and have them move on. You want to find someone with the personality that can push beyond. It takes a lot, right? Like some people don't like posting pictures of themselves online or in Instagram and etc. And this style of a method requires someone who's willing to put themselves out there, not only in their beliefs but in their personality. So finding the right person is really important. And then once you found that person, it's about developing a content style and understanding. So whether it's in the office, setting up a really cool little booth, Travis did that at home, actually, believe it or not. And, just set up a little kind of room and he was shooting his videos in there and he was editing himself and he was putting captions on them. And, there's a number of different little softwares that make that not a crazy, cost killing thing. And then he was doing just, selfie videos. It wasn't overproduced. It was real. It was genuine. He was talking about stuff in the space. And depending on the world that you live in, think about listeners listening to this, how many times you're in the kitchen at lunch at the office and you're just, shooting the shit over a topic, related to your business and how into it you get and how engaging those conversations are. Really what you're doing is just taking those and putting them out there for potential customers and people in the space to see. And what that does is it just has like a triple kind of effect. The first one is it's grounding. It gives people the understanding and the visual that you understand the space and you're preaching it. And that's a really cool thing. Two is it allows a connection between a potential client and your company, which is almost like kind of third party warm after that point, which is really, really cool. And then the third thing is just having that valuable content to be able to drive through the ads on LinkedIn. I see so many LinkedIn ads for brands that are, continuously really, crappy and they're not engaging. But using that type of content, turns out to be a lot more powerful. And we all know that, value-based marketing now, especially in the B2B space is killing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So to wrap things up too, Joe, you wanted to touch on this idea of creating internal champion programs, enabling people to share good content that much more readily. Can you speak to those tactics a little bit as we kind of round out the conversation here?
Yeah, I think B2B companies are sitting on internal gold mines that they're not utilizing properly. I know that, there's a lot of different things. I know getting everyone in the organization just to change to a, internal chat method is hard, and I understand that. But I think if companies better use their staff and their team members to push that content out, whether it's from the internal influencer or for content being purposed for ads, et cetera, when you have an organization, regardless of size, even if you're 10 people or you're 5,000 people sharing that content, you're just creating that word of mouth effect where that one piece of content now is being shared by 100 people. Out of those 100 people, a couple of their friends in the industry share it. And you're just creating this, what influencer marketing is, right? So I always say to a brand, who's looking to do influencer marketing, which we kind of debunked at the beginning of this conversation. I say, start with your internal team. They're going to be your best influencers possible. And then work from there. Develop the content, create an internal champion who's becoming your influencer, and then couple that with the periodic influencers in the space who are attainable, and then obviously implementing a paid strategy. That is a real recipe to driving leads. And I can tell you from that method alone, Viral Nation has driven, I want to say probably last year, $5 to $10 million in business. So it's a real thing. And it's something that is so non-invasive and so incredibly, well taken by the clients that I really suggest it to anyone in the B2B space.
I love it, Joe. If anybody listening to this would like to go further into this topic with you, pose a follow-up question, or just stay connected with you and the team at Viral Nation, what's the best way for them to find you guys?
Yeah, of course. So www.viralnation.com is obviously our site. My name is Joe Gagliese on LinkedIn. My last name's hard to pronounce, but I'm sure it'll be linked here. And again, anyone can feel free to reach out to myself personally, joe@viralnation.com.
I love it. Joe, thanks again for being on the show today.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey guys, Logan from Sweetfish again. I don't normally interject at the end of episodes like this, but as I was listening to Joe talk about the story of their VP of Business Development leverage video content to build his personal brand and the impact that had for them as a company, I was reminded of a resource from our friends over at BombBomb. So they put together a comprehensive piece of content, the Salesperson's Guide to Video. It has tips and tricks on shooting video, as well as a lot of gear resources and things things like that. So if you are thinking about equipping someone on your team, or maybe you're the person on your team looking to lean into personal video content, this would definitely be something you want to check out. We'll link to it in the show notes, and I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you as always so much for listening. We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.